Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Kerrang HQ. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. My name's Sam, I'm the editor of Kerrang. You're joining us for In Conversation With, and this week's guest is Mr. Andy Biersack.
Yes.
That was a good round of applause, I feel.
It's a fantastic round of applause.
Fantastic.
I've paid them all so much for that. Do you hear how, especially deep my voice is right now?
It's really
more
booming
so than it's
across
because
these
I've been
mics.
talking about myself all day for like a week and a half. And my voice is getting sick of hearing my voice, so it's just going to start to shut off.
Well, you've only got 45 more minutes or so of talking about yourself.
By the end, it's just going to be like this.
That's
They're
fine.
talking
Do you know sign language?
real low, like Barry White.
We could sign our way through this.
Juliet, my wife, she was describing my voice to someone. She's like, "Yeah, he kind of sounds like Barry White." I was like, "What?" And then I realized that I do kind of sound like Barry White a little bit. And so, if you're curious what the next Andy Black record will sound like, just listen to Barry White, and that's what the inspiration is.
Very good. Andy, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We appreciate it. We're here to talk about your new record under your Andy Black project.
Yes.
Your second to come under that, The Ghost of Ohio. It's finally set to be released on April 12th, I believe.
Yes.
So we're creeping ever closer. We've been spinning the record a fair bit in the office to really dive into kind of the narrative of it and the sort of the overarching story of it. So, I mean, the sort of first thing that came to mind, with it being so kind of autobiographical almost, how long have you had this kind of story in your head?
I mean, I would say that the story has existed my whole life because it's so heavily based on events and things that have occurred in my life. But the truth of the matter is that the element of like the ghost story portion didn't really start until around 2 years ago. I've been working on a book of like stories from my childhood with my friend Ryan Downey, and in the middle of doing that, we started finding that all these places that I had spent years of my childhood were like terrible, scary places that I had no idea. I just had a hunch these places were creepy. So I went to like after school and daycare and stuff. My parents worked full time, so I was always in different like daycare programs. And I went to summer camp at a place that I thought was terrifying and knew was terrifying, but didn't know the depths of the terrifyingness. It turns out that it was like a tuberculosis and hospice center where they would essentially it was just a death factory where people, and there were tunnels underneath that are closed now, but you can get in there. And they would take the bodies underneath the building and then bring them to a potter's grave for all the unmarked ones. And guess where I played all my baseball as a kid? On the potter's grave. They built baseball fields over it. So, and then I was like, this is crazy. And it started snowballing. So I started researching all these places. And I would ask my grandmother about different places. I go, why is there like 3 gravestones by the school I went to? And then there's a school. She goes, oh yeah, because they just put the school over the graveyard. I was like, so I went to school on a graveyard? And then it was just insane. Every time I would look into these things, it just got creepier and weirder. And I thought I have to combine all of these stories with the actual kind of semi-autobiographical story of being this kind of lonely kid who felt like he didn't belong. And I was always, dressing up in elaborate clothes and trying to like turn myself into a superhero. So what if this character was me in a way, and what if I could find a way of making the story not about me as a teenager, but more so about this character that is kind of stuck in a different time and is not only hated for his interests, but literally to the nth degree is murdered because he's so suspicious and they don't like him in his town. And then we kind of expanded on that, and that was the basis for the story. But it really wasn't until I got into writing the record that I knew where it was all going to go.
So to talk about that kind of autobiographical element to it, I mean, you said in the prologue piece of audio that you did, which, by the way, to hear your voice without seeing you, you've got an amazing career as a voivoiceover artist if you ever need to fall back on one.
Thank you. I'm always curious if you have any fallback plans for me. I would like to hear any other gig options. It's always good to have a fallback plan. I've never had one before. But today, I've had 3 different people give me fallback options. So while you're promoting a record, the last thing you want to hear is people going, well, if it doesn't work out for you, here's another job.
Well, what were the other 2?
So earlier it was a teacher because I speak forever without caring if anybody's listening. And then the third one was I should re-engage my interest in like the supernatural and have like a supernatural like TV show thing.
Now that would be good.
Yeah,
that would be really good. I know you have an accompanying comic book with this, but a TV show as well would be.
I would be too afraid, and because I am like I say that I don't believe in ghosts, and I also think, don't worry, ghosts. Like, I know I really believe in you, but I'm just saying I don't believe in you. Like, right now I'm worried that there's a ghost listening to me. I'm saying way too much. I've already gone too far.
As far as
if
I
there
know.
are any ghosts in the area, please remember, I got you, ghosts. We're fine.
I don't believe that our office has been built on a graveyard. Hopefully.
Look, I don't know what to trust because I didn't think that I grew up on those things, and here we are. So, and the thing is, like, it sucks to have a premonition or feeling about something and then have it confirmed. Like, there was a creepy old church that was on the corner, like, down the road from my house, and I was terrified of it my whole life. And I said things to, like, my mom, like, that's a scary place. And she'd be like, oh, whatever. And then we would keep going. And then I looked it up, and there was a murder-suicide of a young boy and a priest there in like the 20s, and their bodies were found in the doorway, and now it's totally like a haunted location, and I never knew any of this shit. So if I wouldn't do like a supernatural show, I would do a I'll guess that your place is haunted show, and I'll just walk around and go, haunted, not haunted, and then they'll run the tests, and then if it's haunted, then I get a candy. I don't have high hopes for what the show would be. This might be a web series.
To talk about that prologue, you said in it, you said that the titular character is terrified of the outside world.
Yes.
How much of that was true of you as a child?
100%. I couldn't, like, I still can't do much of anything without worrying. Like, I just did an interview earlier, and I was talking about how I spent the entire day a wreck because I thought I knew somebody, and I went to give them a hug, and I didn't know them, and they went to handshake me, and then I had to yell, I'm hugging you, and then they put their arm like into the middle of my stomach, and then I went, and like hugged the outside, and now that's all I can think about. So if you imagine that has caused me this much agony, imagine like walking across a bridge when you're that kind of person. I would go across the Ohio River with my dad, and I'd be holding his hand, and the entire time I'm thinking, you could fall off, that thing could fall apart. I'm like 8 years old, mortified of everything all the time, and that has been my whole life. Like I've told this story a few times today, but I want to let everyone in on 5 minutes of my life. Last night, and I think that after I say this, there is at least a 50% chance that everyone will leave here thinking that's just an actual crazy person that they've given a microphone to. So I'm staying in a hotel, and there's I don't know why I needed to say that. You assume that I'm staying in a hotel. I'm at someone's house. Now I'm in a hotel because I'm not from here, and there was a cable that had gotten loose from the roof. I don't know, roof cable. You know what it is. It's a roof cable. So
I know exactly what you mean.
Classic roof cable situation. Fell down and was smacking the window. And so I open the curtain fucking thing, and I look in, and there it is. And I go, okay, cable, fine. And then I go to bed, and I'm exhausted, and I turn off all the lights. But then the cable keeps smacking, and then I go, but what if it isn't that cable? What if it's actually a monster? And I'm like, no, I already know. This is a conversation in my head, silently. I know that it's a cable. Stop it. And then my lizard brain goes, remember some monsters? Let's think about different monsters that you know about. And then the weird like nun from The Conjuring, Valak.
Yeah.
So here's what happens. This side of my brain goes, Valak, 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 Valak. And then this side of my brain goes, stop saying that. And then this side gets louder and keeps yelling it. And then this side keeps going. And then I go, fuck both of you. And then I stand up and I go, I'm going to put on something pleasant. And I put on Friends on my iPad, and I turn up the volume, but it's not loud enough to drown out the banging. Valak, outside, we all know. I've established there is a nun outside. So I then turn on the sound machine on my phone, and now it's so loud that if Valak comes in from behind me, I won't hear Valak. So I think, well, now I have to turn on the light. So let's review. 5 minutes before I was going to bed. Now I'm in a hotel room by myself with all the lights on, a sound machine on, and Friends on because Valak is outside. That's every 5 minutes for me is a new example of that. So the idea of being like a ghost who's lonely and afraid to go outside, is pretty accurate. I really, when I was a kid, I just wanted to be alone and I wanted to create things because I felt too much anxiety to be around other people because the way that I'm wired didn't make sense with what other people were talking about. I couldn't understand how people could just have so much carefree fun when, like, don't you know that terrible things are going on all the time? Like, it was hard for me to relate to other kids. And so ultimately, I mean, look, this is what led to me being someone who was drunk all the time for like 8 years because I could silence all the shit that's going on up here all the time, and that was hugely unhealthy. So now I've just had to deal with the fact that I'm a guy who turns on everything in the middle of the night because I'm afraid of a monster outside that I know is a cable.
I think it's very quaint and very British that you'd think the monster would knock first before entering your room.
Yeah, possibly. I think that the monster would but creepy knock, like.
Okay.
So what I do is at home.
I mean, that's pretty weird, and I just watched you do that, but I'm kind of weirded out by that noise.
See? What I do at home, I'm like getting like hot thinking about this right now. I check everything 3 times before I go to bed. So I check all the alarms, and then I turn the light on, and then my favorite part, and this makes no sense, is I go outside and I stand in front of the house for 5 seconds, and I count to 5, and then I go back inside. If there were a murderer outside, I have stood outside for no reason for 5 seconds and allowed them to kill me, just unabashedly. And I don't know how that protects the house, but in my mind, ego. I'm so strong that I can protect the home with my 5 seconds of, okay. And then I walk back inside. So yes, I get the story behind the ghost being on an intimate level. So what's important to me is that the story, while all of these things are true and they're silly and they're things about me, the thing is that those things aren't things that I revel in. They're silly things, but it is a problem that I've had to deal with. And what I've done is I take those elements of things that bother me, and more often than bothering me, I try to apply them to the positive things. You know, I'm always working on something new or creating a new project or something because I'm so hypercritical and I analyze things in such a way. It's almost like my superpower. I have this ability to create in a prolific way. And so in the case of the ghost in this story, it's a character that can't relate to other people but doesn't want to feel completely detached. So the idea is that over the course of this 100-year journey that he wants to affect change from the outside. He wants to be able to go up to people that are positive influences in the world and help them and aid them in their way against these evil forces because he himself can't be the one standing in the front lines.
You've painted a pretty terrifying picture of Ohio so far, but what was it like growing up there, and kind of how did growing up in that place in particular feed into the person that you are?
I would say that I didn't really think it had any effect on me until very recently. When I was younger, I was so... First of all, I didn't even want to claim where I was from when I first started because I was so mad and angry that they didn't acknowledge me at all, that I had come from this little town and I had found success and there was nobody that was from this area that had any kind of like stardom in any capacity. And I was like, why didn't anybody ever, like, why hasn't anybody reached out? Why is nobody saying like, hey, this guy succeeded? And it was when I was really early in my career, it was such a source of frustration and like misguided anger. I mean, I was completely displeased with the whole idea of being there. And so I didn't even want to claim it. And almost to the point where when we'd come on stage, I would say, we're Black Brides from Hollywood, California. And it was just as much a positive thing about Hollywood as it was fuck you to Ohio, really. Because it was like, I've tried so hard and have achieved this much so far in my life, and you can't even say anything nice about me. You can't play my songs on the radio. I can't be in the newspaper. I can't be referenced ever. Like, why after my whole adolescence of you treating me like shit, blanketed statement of Ohio, why are you still treating me like shit? You know, why didn't I get vindication? And it was this weird thing that stayed in me, and it wasn't until around 2014 my grandmother was dealing with chemo for cancer, and I had a little bit of time off tour, and I went and stayed in Cincinnati with her during her chemo treatments. And I wanted to spend time with her just in a way where I wasn't distracted by anything, and I could sleep just at her house, and if she needed anything, I could take care of her, and I could drive her to the chemo and everything like that. So I did that, and by doing that, I would have to go to the grocery store for her, and I'd have to go around this little town that I'm from in Delhi and see people I grew up with and see my teachers and everything. And I would see them, and some of them would say, hey, congratulations on everything, or others would just be nice, or others would ignore me entirely. There was no... that moment never came that I had imagined in my head, where either there would be some big blowout and people would be, mad at me, or people would be like, oh my God, the prodigal son has returned. Thank you for being here. There was kind of none of that. And by the way, at the time, my mom was driving a car that had a big ass sticker of my face on the back. And the only car I could drive when I was staying in town was my mom's car. So I was driving essentially the Andy Mobile around my hometown. I'm driving a brown Saturn with a big, this big sticker of my face with all the makeup on the back window, and hey, I'm back. Look at that. You're right. The most egotistical thing. Not only am I here, but check out my face on this car, on this mid-sized sedan. So I was there, and I started feeling, I could feel the kind of resentment that I had in this childhood anxiety melt off of me, and I started to feel even then more of a connection to where I was from. And so I started to think, well, maybe this place has had more of a positive effect on me than I thought. Just because there were a few assholes when I was a kid doesn't mean that this place is a representation of all the negative stuff, because I started thinking about all the positive things from when I was a kid and how close I am with my family and going to football games and everything else. And that became a big part of my interest in rediscovering my roots in that way. And so Juliet and I started going back to Cincinnati 2-3 times a year and really spending time there. And now, ironically, I guess now that I've stopped trying, now I have a radio show in Cincinnati and they care about me and whatever else. And it's the irony is that when I was 20, I would have done anything for that. And now I really appreciate it, but it's not the reason why I'm going home. I'm not, it's not ego driven. It's more for me and my heart. I can remember there was one that really, really upset me. It was the only time that Cincinnati had taken anything I'd done seriously. It was during the tour for We Stitch These Wounds, on the summer tour that we did. The radio station, one of the radio stations there, was going to have us come in and do the morning show, and we were going to play acoustic. And we did it, and I was like, oh my God, it's finally happening, and Cincinnati's going to love me, whatever. And I thought it went so great. And then the next day, I heard from the radio person at the label. Was like, what was so bad about yesterday? I was like, I don't know. I think it went well. And he said, well, the guy said that you're a real jerk and that you were really mean to everybody. And I was like, no, I wasn't. So that really led me to this no matter what, they're gonna hate me and screw you. And wait, did you flip me off? Hold on. And then I stop a whole show for 20 minutes because someone flipped me off. But so that was a big part of the early days of my career, and a big part of my life was this whole chip on my shoulder thing. And now, it's not that I don't have angst and I'm not upset about things, but I have such an appreciation for my home because, for better or for worse, it's where I'm from, and it shaped my moral compass and everything else.
The record comes with a accompanying comic book, graphic novel. I'm not sure what the correct vernacular is there, but
it would be funny if this was just vodka.
You're the second person that's made that
because I don't drink, and I notably don't drink, but if I went from not drinking for 3 years into just a full cup of vodka, just a weird social experiment, I'd probably die, honestly.
The accompanying comic book.
Yes.
How is it to work?
I'm not drinking vodka.
Let's move on. How is it to work on that alongside a record?
Well, I can kind of explain this now because I think there's some confusion about what the difference between the book and the record and everything else is. The prologue that you've heard is my original writing for the concept for the comic book. So that is what I sent to the comic book company and the publishers and said, this is what I want to do. And then I did some drawings, and I did a painting, and I did some Photoshop renderings of what I thought the character would look like. And that was the initial thing. That story, what the prologue is not necessarily what the full comic book story is, because obviously you would need more for a story than just that to be able to go across a graphic novel. So the basis for it was that, and then I got with a guy named Scott Tuft, and he is a professional badass comic book writer. And so I got on the phone with him and we started talking through the story. And it was, it was things like I didn't know what to call this. I wanted to call the city something involving Cincinnati, and I thought maybe Seven Hills because that's one of the names. And then he thought, well, 7 Points. That sounds more comic booky. So it was stuff like that where we'd go through different elements of my story, and he would really expand on it, and then really took the ball and ran with it. And then Eric Donovan, who's the artist, he took the initial sketches and ideas that I had and really designed the character into what people have seen now with the images that are out there. So it was truly a collaborative effort from me kind of starting with this nugget of an idea into these real pros coming in and helping me shape what inevitably became what I think is a really quality book.
Do you think the record is a soundtrack to that book, or is the book kind of the visual accompaniment to the record?
I think that the record, I mean, look, you're gonna have to. It should probably take you more than like 40 minutes to read the whole book, but you could listen to the record in my mind and get the idea of what the book is in a sequential way. So maybe it makes it more that it's a soundtrack inspired by. Like when I was a kid, I had a Batman Forever soundtrack poster, and I thought that those were all Batman-themed bands. So I went out and I bought Seal's Kiss from a Rose like CD, and I was dumbfounded to realize that it had fucking nothing to do with Batman. I thought it was going to be like all Batman songs, and like that there'd be some Batman-related artwork on the inside. And so what my goal is to make a soundtrack that is not only inspired by, but I literally am the character that's in the thing. So no Seal-like disappointment for anyone. These songs are not only inspired by, they are Ghost of Ohio.
Good to clarify that.
Yes, I'm not Seal. I'm sick of this question.
We had a couple of questions from our audience before they came tonight. And Ross, I don't know if Ross is here or not. It's very bright here. I can't see anything.
Ross? Nope.
No Ross. Great question, though, even though he's not here. He wanted to.
Is it Ross from Friends?
I'd be highly doubtful if it was.
Can I tell you about my first spray tan?
Please do.
I'd never been spray tan before, and I thought it would be fun to like try it. And so Juliet and I went, and I got like it's gone now, but I got like a light, like the lightest one you could get. And I was afraid that I'd be like Ross from, I don't know if you've seen the episode of Friends where he gets all
yeah.
So I was afraid, so I told him to do that, but then I didn't really think about it. I didn't know what I was going to wear. So I wore white, like tight white boxer shorts. And so not only did I have shorts, like pants made out of a tan line, but I soaked the boxers in like brown liquid, and it was just obscene because they're what, like it wasn't. So then I'm uncomfortable. It was terrible. So what I'm saying is, if you get a spray tan, don't wear white boxers. I feel like, just avoid that entirely. I probably won't do it again. I just thought it would be fun. I never tried it.
So Ross, who may or may not be from Friends.
From France?
From France.
Is there a chance he's from France?
This has gone horribly wrong.
French Ross. Bob Ross.
Tell me about the first time you went to France.
First time I went to France?
Yeah.
I don't remember. I think we probably played in like a broom closet or something. I don't know. We played one venue where, like those, like the scrims that people had. It was pretty big in like the metalcore world back in the day. We all had like PVC piping with the logo in the center. The venue, the size of the stage, it was in Toulouse, France, and that was our backdrop, was just one of those. And the bathroom to all of it was directly behind the stage, but not behind a wall. Like the door was exposed. So like people would walk like a little bit on the stage during the show to go pee. And then eventually there was a line. So like at one point I look over and there's like people like that far away just in line to pee. And then it started to wrap around more. And you really haven't, like people will feign excitement when they're in the crowd, even if they're not stoked, just to like, because they're at a show. But when they really have to pee, nobody can be bothered to pretend to care. So it's just people that are like doing the pee dance, mad as hell at you, like this far away. Toulouse, France.
So Ross, who may or may not be from Friends or France, wanted to know that kind of after the success that Gerard Way's had with the Umbrella Academy and taking that onto Netflix, whether you think that Ghost of Ohio would take a similarly good leap to the screen.
Boy, I hope so. I mean, I wouldn't try in any way to compare at this point in it's my first foray into this. You know, Gerard has done this for so long and has such success in it. It would be fantastic for something to achieve that kind of success. But at this point, I just want people to enjoy the book, and hopefully I can do more. But I mean, that's always the end game, is to be able to get to that point.
And you've obviously got a bit of acting experience yourself from
Yes.
American Satan. Would you want to star in it if it were to happen, or would you?
I
want
don't think so.
else?
I think that I would want to be involved in it, but I don't think it should be me. I feel like that's a little too meta. You know what I mean? Like I would want to be involved, but I think it should be an actor that's.
Who would you want to play you, or to play the semi-autobiographical you?
I'm just, all I have is silly things, so I'm trying to think of an actual.
Give
like
us the silliest thing.
John Goodman, just all the things that are come into my head immediately. I can't think of anything that isn't dumb. That should be my slogan, really, is I can't think of anything that isn't dumb.
We'll come back to this right at the end. We'll loop back round to this at the end, so you've got a little bit of time to think on it. In the meantime, Beth, who I think is Beth here. Beth.
Now, by the way, we're going to have a series, and I'm going to play myself because my ego won't allow it at the last minute. I'll be like, never mind, fuck it, I'm doing it. Forget all that shit I said.
So Beth wanted to know if you were to create a soundtrack to another film, what film would you want to write the score to?
I'd love to be involved in something comic book related. I hear that they're making another Crow movie coming up, and I'd love to be involved in that. So that would be a perfect one for me. Would be able to write music for that.
I mean, you've got your open pitch now to the world watching.
Dear the Crow, please let me write music for your movie.
Your music in Andy Black and in Black Veil Brides has always kind of been about creating worlds and creating different characters and things, which I think is really, really interesting. How much of that is inspired by the music that you grew up listening to?
I think a lot of it is. But more so, like, people don't understand, my favorite things when I was a kid were like equal parts Kiss, Motley Crue, The Misfits, and like Sweeney Todd and Phantom of the Opera, and like really dark musicals. I loved musicals, not because I love show tunes, but because I love the idea of like songs that told a story in a large way. And that's why I was so heavily influenced by like Meatloaf and things like that, because it was so dramatic. I loved the artifice. I loved all of that stuff that surrounded it. And quite frankly, growing up with the kind of Catholic background I did, where everything is about pageantry and this over-the-top kind of stuff, that was, I think, all inspirational to me. So the idea of making something that wasn't there and creating this world that I could get lost in was always the biggest appeal. Because the thing is, like, from the time I started, I've never sat down to try to write a song, and I've said this a million times. I don't write songs for anyone else, because that's aggressive, I think. If I'm sitting here and going, I know what you like, and I'm going to write a song about it, that's like weird, because I don't know, and I wouldn't pretend to know, and it's our biggest goal as artists to write something that others can connect with. But all the music that inspired me, like say it's Bruce Springsteen, I know he didn't go, I bet that there's going to be a kid that's born in 30 years in Cincinnati who's going to want a song about this kind of a thing. But when I was listening to those songs, I felt like it was about me, because it was about a personal experience that someone else had and that I could share with. So that was the goal always, is to write things that are about my personal experience or something I would like to experience, or an idea that I have that can connect with other people on a level that they choose, not one that I dictate to them. It's not my position to tell someone else how to enjoy something. And so building a world that my characters and my ideas can live in is allowing for me to show the audience and the people who care, this is where I think it could go, but you can kind of do whatever you want with it. Like when it comes to like, when I did like, thinking of like the name for the characters in Legion of the Black or any of those kind of things, those are mostly left open to interpretation. You know, I have fear and I have my things, but all the amount of fan fiction and art and all this stuff that people do about it because these characters have inspired them or they want to write more, like that's the fun thing about building this world, is that other people get to explore it further.
How much of those characters do you think are taken from different parts of your personality?
I mean, quite frankly, and I don't, this is not an attack on the publication that I'm sitting with right now, but no, it's really not an attack. When I preface it, I mean it's actually not. When I first came here to England, there was a huge part of my on-stage and personality that was shaped by the idea that a narrative started immediately. Black Veil Brides, the band you love to hate, the most divisive band in the world, the band everybody hates, the Marmite test of rock. This band is hated. Hate, hate, hate. Everybody hates this band. How does this band sell any records? Everybody hates them. That was on the cover of, and then I go, well, if they hate us, then I need to rise to that occasion. I need to hate more. So then the quote would be, everybody hates this band, and then it'd be a picture of me going, and I hate all the other bands. And then there would be a constant battle. And then we go to download, and everybody's throwing stuff at us, and then I'm mooning everybody. And it was just this like constant cycle that had started based on the narrative that we were so divisive and that we were such the most like outlandish thing ever, also the thing that you should absolutely hate because it's terrible, and at no point was there a middle ground. And so that, like when I did Wretched and Divine, I feel like to a large degree that influenced that, because in the middle of writing Wretched and Divine, I felt like I need to stand up against all this stuff. And what if I created this ultimate version of these enemies that we have, whether they're perceived or real? And I'm not blaming magazines for that. I'm saying that at the time that was a huge narrative, not only in the life, but I'm 19, 20 years old, and I'm thinking, I have to figure out a way past this. And also I was emboldened by the fact that this audience had developed and people cared about what I had to say, and I wanted to stand up for them. The irony of all that is that ultimately I kind of became a bully in my own right, because I would straight up stop shows to yell at people, because I was, in my mind, I was defending this concept, and I was defending the people who cared about us, and I was defending us from the people who were saying terrible things. And that directly influenced the Fear character and the Eve Black character and all of the, the David and Goliath on the cover and all that stuff. It was directly influenced by the idea that we are this thing that isn't believed in and that people felt this negative thing about us. So I can't help but think that to some degree what's happening in my life probably more directly influences stuff more than my actual personality. So with me finding more affinity and more time in Ohio and spending more time there, and then researching about all these ghost stories and everything, and then also feeling at a place now where, look, when I wrote Shadowside, by and large, most of that record is sad as hell. I mean, it's truly about my darkest moments, because I was dealing with coming out of being kind of a piece of shit for a couple of years and having to take accountability for myself and being sober, and all this stuff was happening and my mind's paying attention. And by the way, all the stuff I described to you about me in the hotel room, and I drank for 8 years to shut that up. Well, guess what you think happened after 8 years after it came back? It had 8 years worth of bullshit to tell me about. So all of that anxiety was coming at me, and so I'm writing all these songs that are truly just the sadness that I feel and the fear that I feel and everything else. That was that record. Moving into this, I didn't feel that way anymore. Sure, I have my idiosyncrasies and I have my upsets, but generally speaking, I'm happy right now, and I enjoy my life. So the time felt right to write this more heroic character in a position of a character that can help people and isn't coming from everything's about revenge. And early on, like, one of the things I had to avoid was the character at the beginning was, I'm going to get my revenge against these people. And I didn't want that to necessarily be all that it's about. It has to be about, I'm going to help people more so than I'm going to hurt other people. So in a roundabout way, I would say that it's all influenced by parts of my personality, but I think more directly it's influenced by things that I'm dealing with.
Where did that shift in your mentality come from? Because I heard the other day you were talking and you said that for so long kind of anger was your fuel. And now that you're very focused on the positive things in life and trying to look at the good side of things, where did that kind of mental shift take place?
I just had to pay attention to myself. I think for the longest time I was running away from myself. When I was about 17, metaphorically speaking, I climbed to the top of a mountain and I strapped a giant boulder behind me, and I started running down the mountain as the boulder chased me. And the boulder was reality, having a job, having financial security, having an education, all that stuff. And I went, nope, and just started running and ran towards the idea of this dream, because I'm not educated, because I don't have financial security other than this thing that I do. I don't have, I didn't come from money. There's nothing about my life that is assured. And I set that up for myself before I was really old enough to know how to make those kind of decisions. So now here I am at 28, and I have to deal with the decisions of the 18-year-old version of me, and I have to do, fortunately, things worked out to the capacity that people are here and still care about me, but those things were decided for me by a version of me that didn't know shit about shit. So now I have to figure out how to be that person. And for the longest time, I thought, I'll put that off, and I'll get really drunk, and that'll help me talk to people because I have such social anxiety that I can't be around anybody, and my brain won't shut up, so I'll black out, and then tomorrow will happen. And that was every single day, and I felt more gross, and I got sick, and I couldn't go on tour, and we canceled tours because I was always in a mess, and it was rough for me. And I just got to the point where I was done with that, and all of a sudden, all that stuff came back. All the reality of the choices I had made and who I was as a person came back to me. And I just thought, I really have to take stock of who I am. And I can't be mad at myself for decisions I've made or being a crazy ass or whatever else. But it would do nobody any good, myself included, to not try to change the things that I thought were ineffective or somehow unkind to other people. I don't really get into arguments much anymore because it's kind of a waste of time. It's not to say that I don't have varying opinions on things, but I don't engage. If someone comes at me with, some angry thing, I tend to now just kind of just feel like, okay, well, that's your perspective on it, and whereas I used to just be so like, I know what to say, and I'm going to show you what I want to say. My fire and the passion that I have, I'm using it for creativity as opposed to pausing myself to fight with somebody.
We were talking in the office earlier trying to figure out when the first time that you actually appeared in Kerrang was, and we think it was about a decade ago, probably 10 years or so ago, which feels like such a hugely long time. And this kind of feeds into something that one of our audience, Abby, was asking about, kind of gaining fame at such a young age, and what you lost or gained from achieving that so young. Do you ever look at things and think, I didn't I missed out on that because at 18 I was touring the world and living quite an abnormal life?
Well, I could really give a shit about like friends or being a teenager and having friends because it wasn't like that was happening for me anyway. You know what I mean? Like quite frankly, I didn't care about having friends. I kind of thought, well, I don't care about you, and I would go do my own thing, which was isolating and lonely. But what that did was, while I didn't care about it, not socializing at all set me up for a very weird early adulthood because I was touring and I was around people that were all significantly older than me and just kind of like taking pieces of personalities and using them. A little bit of crazy party person, a little bit of, musically inclined person, a little bit of angry guy. Taking pieces and trying to build what your adult personality is when you don't have any like social skills. It's kind of like a cat or something where you're like, they have kind of a rusty toolbox of emotion. They're like, you can hang out with them for a little bit, but when they decide that they're done, they'll just run away. Like that was, I had just enough fake personality to be around long enough to like black out and then go back to my hotel room and be sad for the rest of the night. You know what I mean? So at that early stage, it was a lot about putting myself together and building who I would be eventually. Now, the beauty of that is that it put me in a position where I bought myself time to figure out who I was. And thankfully, people, many of whom have stuck by me for years and years, gave me the opportunity to grow up in the public eye to some degree. I can't imagine what it would be like to be like ubiquitously famous and have to be that age, because I know for me it was awkward enough growing up with people paying attention on just the scale of fame that I have. So I feel very fortunate that people stuck with me through all my growing pains and different eras. And I don't look back on any. Sometimes people will go, "Oh, can you believe what you used to wear and all that?" And I really don't have that. I don't have any shame for any of the shit that we did visually or stylistically or anything, because I think it all made me who I am now.
Do you feel that, to sort of go back to some of the anger and things that you felt at the time going through some of those things, do you feel that you really appreciated what was happening as the band grew?
No, because I was never thinking about what was happening then. I was always thinking about what the next thing was, and thinking about how can I push this and how can I advance this and what can I do that's going to get us to the next rung on the thing. How can we get to the next step on the ladder? So I think that there's probably a lot of things, that I could have spent. For instance, the download thing. For playing for 100,000 people, I probably could have spent more time appreciating that and less time thinking about like mooning those people with my butt. But you know, it's pointless to live that way. I have enough random regrets, like, you know, going to hug somebody when they were trying to shake my hand. Like, things like that happen to me all day long. So it's too much to add that to my existing anxiety to go like, well, now think about all your regrets in your career. Like, it's just too much to do. So, yeah, I mean, I think, look, when you're 19, 20, you're going to look at things differently than you do when you're 27, 28. Like, it's just the way it is. So for me now, I have a different perspective on stuff, but I don't think that there was anything about it that necessarily I have a large amount of regrets for.
Lisa, who I think's in our audience tonight, hopefully, she wanted to know that as a songwriter, when you're actually working on new material and working through lyrics and ideas, how do you kind of compartmentalize what goes into Andy Black and what goes into Black Veil Brides?
I don't know. I don't know that I have enough experience with it yet doing both to know exactly what the process is. You know, the vast majority of Veil was written around the same time, and some of the songs on the record were songs that I had originally written intending to use for Andy Black. And then through that process, Jake and Jinx would take some of those songs. A song like Destiny on that record, or Our Destiny, was a song that was originally written for Andy Black, and then it just never felt right. And then they started playing guitar on it and wrote their guitar parts, and it's like, oh, that's why this song doesn't feel right, because it's a Black Veil song. So I think in many respects, I don't know that I have a process to change them so much as I just know it when I hear it, you know. And what's funny to me is that, you know, other people might feel differently. They may hear a song like When They Call My Name and go, oh, it sounds like Andy Black. But to me, it doesn't at all, because to me, as I'm writing it, I don't have the same feelings. I can understand that sonically there's a similarity, same producer, same time frame, same instrumentation, in that there is a guitar and drums on it. But to me, it sounds like a Black Veil song. And that's, if it sounds to me like I'm writing for the band I've been writing for since I was 16, then I feel like I'm a pretty good authority on that.
Just to end on Black Veil, what's next for BVB?
Well, you know, Veil was meant to be the last chapter of the story of the Wild Ones and everything. And it was, you know, for me, it was always funny because that felt very open-ended. We had done the record, we'd done Wretched and Divine, and then there was an interest in the band to try to do something that was a little bit more bare bones. And so we worked with Bob Rock, and that was an excellent experience. But I always wanted to go back to the world, you know, the world that we had kind of left, and I wanted to see how we could follow it up, and it just felt like a natural thing to end it. So, you know, at this point, I think that obviously we intend on doing the 10-year anniversary re-release and rework some of those songs. The funny thing about that is that the 10-year anniversary of We Stitch These Wounds, it's funny that we're doing it now because I've been trying to do it since like 2013. I can remember Jake and I sitting on the bus going, we got to do this because we just in 3 years, we were so much better as musicians and as just knowing how to be in a studio. We wanted to give those songs a fair shake. There's songs like Never Give In and Heaven's Calling that just sonically they're so poor in the way that they were recorded, not by anybody's fault, but we just didn't have much money in what we were doing. I would love to hear what they sound like done now. And vocally for me, I'd love to be able to sing those songs now. And for it not to be something to replace We Stitch These Wounds, but something that can be a kind of a supplementary thing for people that want to hear what that material is. And then also we intend on doing some new songs for it and everything. So Jake and Jinx and I have been working on that, and Jake's probably going to produce the whole thing. So that'll be really great. And then moving forward, I don't know what the future holds. I think that whatever we do, it's going to be something entirely different because we kind of closed the chapter with Veil on what that era of the band was. And so it's actually kind of exciting to know that moving forward, it's going to be different. It's going to be fun and exciting. I think that it's sort of funny to me because when people say, are you done with Black Veil Brides? Like, I have a question for you. Do you hear your first name when someone says it? Or do you think about your first name? You hear it in the sense that somebody says it, but do you ever think about what your name is? Or is it just a sound that's associated with you? Like, do you think about the actual sounds in your name?
No.
Right. So my name's Andy, right? And if someone says Andy and I know in the right context, I'll respond to that. But I don't think about it's synonymous with me. From the time I could hear things, that was the sound that corresponds with me. Similarly, from the time I was 16 years old, the sounds Black Veil Brides have corresponded with me. synonymous with my life. I moved to Los Angeles, uprooted my whole adolescence. I dropped out of high school. I left everyone that I knew and said, I'm going to do this. And then just so people could go on Instagram and say, why don't you go back to your band? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me because it is everything to me. So I'm not separated from it. It means so much to me, and I understand why people feel a sense of anger, and I understand why people feel betrayed to a certain degree because they love that band. But you have to also understand that it's like air to me. It's part of my life. And whether I'm doing it right now or not, it has meant so much to me as a musician, and it's meant so much to me, and it's the same. I don't want to speak for the other members of the band, but I feel it similarly for them. You know, I think if you ask Jake or Cece or Jinx or anybody what their interests are, they would say Black Veil Brides in as much as they would say anything else. You know, Jinx is scoring films, and Jake is doing Alonia, and Cece's got all kinds of stuff going on. So there's a lot where I just feel like the members of the band care deeply about the band. And it's important to be able to understand that while the band may not be active right now, it's not the end of time. So I think that there is something really exciting coming for the band, and all hope is not lost because I'm doing an anti-Black record. But I want to prepare people that I'm taking this record and this cycle seriously. I want to tour it properly. I want to go everywhere in the world with it. I don't want it to be 6 months of me touring and then I have to go back to the other thing. I want to be able to do both at once. I can record the songs I need to record at home. I mean, I wrote most of them 10 years ago. So, you know, the songs for the re-release, we're working on them right now. Jake has already gotten started on them. So I want to tour this record properly and pay attention to it. And I want to make sure that the people who listen to me understand that it's not because I'm abandoning something, but because I believe in this record. And I want it to be heard. And I want people to take it seriously. And you can't determine how somebody else feels about it. But to me, I want to show that I'm taking it seriously. And if they don't enjoy it, that's totally cool. You can sit this out. But there will be new Black Veil material. But for now, I really want to focus on this.
Well, Andy, good luck with it all. April 12th, Ghost of Ohio. Thank you for spending some time with us this evening.
Thank you very much. And I'll take all of your contingency plans for if my career dissipates into consideration.
Please do. Please do.
Right.
Ladies and gentlemen, just have a round of applause,
Thanks,
please,
guys.
for Andy Biersack.
Thank you. My butt hurts the least of any of the chairs I've been in today.